Your monthly subscription box from Postflybox.com includes all the materials needed to tie a dozen flies, along with some extra goodies. The Ice Minnow is a rather simple yet highly effective streamer that sinks quickly and sheds water well, making it easy to cast, and it imitates a large number of freshwater bait fish on which trout regularly feed. Start by inserting the point of one of the size 8 hooks into the small hole of one of the silver beads. A little pressure may be needed to slip the bead over the hook barb. You can then get the bead positioned up behind the hook eye. The next step is to get the assembly firmly secured in the jaws of your tying vise. Pick up the coil of solder wire and get hold of the bitter end in the fingertips of your left hand. Start taking touching wraps up the hook shank with the wire. After 5 or 6 turns, helicopter the wire to break it off close and clean. Slip the wire wraps rearward to expose some of the hook shank behind the bead. Pick up a small amount of superglue, here Fly Tire Z-Men, and apply a drop to the hook shank between the wire wraps and the bead. Then, slide the wire wraps forward up into the back end of the bead and hold them there for a few seconds to ensure the adhesive sets. With the adhesive set, you'll be able to tuck in that pesky little tail of solder wire nice and close to the other wraps. Load a bobbin with the spool of 6/0 white thread. Get the thread started on the hook shank at the back edge of the wire, and after taking a few wraps rearward, snip off the excess tag. Take thread wraps over top of the wire wraps to further anchor them and lock the bead in place. Pull a fairly sparse clump of the olive SST dubbing free from the bundle and find its midpoint. Snip the clump in half and slide each of the 2 clumps back and forth in your fingers so the snipped off ends don't look quite so squared off. Combine the 2 clumps and it should now look something like this. Make sure it's placed within easy reach on your tying bench before moving on to the next step. Pull down on your bobbin to expose about 6 inches of tying thread and place the middle finger of your left hand on top of the thread down by the bobbin nozzle. Pull the bobbin back up and take rearward wraps with your tying thread to create a dubbing loop about 4 inches in length. With the bottom of the loop on the tip of your middle finger, you can open and close the loop with your thumb and index finger. Without letting go of the loop, pick up the bundle of dubbing with your right hand and insert it into the loop. Try to get the clump's midpoint located between the 2 thread strands as you pinch them together in the fingertips of your left hand. Pick up a dubbing whirl and insert it into the bottom of the thread loop. Give the whirl a good clockwise spin as if you're looking down on it. This will cause the dubbing to spin up in the loop. Using a bodkin, pick out the trapped dubbing fibers. Attaching hackle pliers to the thread loop below the dubbing will make wrapping much easier. Relocate your tying thread to just behind the bead, then wet your fingers and sweep the dubbing fibers rearward. Start taking touching wraps with the dubbing noodle, preening the fibers back as you go. It may get a little clunky, but that's okay. When you reach your tying thread, use it to anchor the bare thread of the dubbing loop, then snip the excess thread part of the loop off close. Pick up your bodkin once again, and this time use it to tease out the trapped dubbing from all around the fly, then sweep the material rearward. Give any overly long fibers a little trim so the back end of the fly comes to a point. It should now look something like this. Get hold of just a small pinch of UV Pearl Ice Dub and fold the midpoint of the fibers around your tying thread. Then bring the thread up at the back edge of the bead. Take a few thread wraps to anchor the dubbing, then snip it off to about a hook shank in length and pull it rearward. You can then take a thread wrap or 2 to pin it back. Get hold of your whip finish tool and use it to do a 4 or 5 turn whip finish, seat the knot well, and snip or cut your tying thread free. A drop of head cement applied to the thread wraps behind the bead will ensure they don't come unraveled and greatly increase the durability of the fly. It's kind of amazing how such a simple pattern can mimic so many of the bait fish trout like to eat.